Hey everybody, this is Aaron Locks, and you have found Talk, Teach, Play, where we discuss everything youth sports. Every time we put a show together, it's exciting to me because I'm able to bring in experts and wonderful people that can help parents, coaches, league organizations, recreation coordinators, anybody involved in youth sports to help make the experience a little bit better. Today we got an amazing topic, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right forward because normally we talk a lot about the topic, but today, Natalie, I think you got such a great mission. What I want to do is start with allowing you to kind of introduce yourself to everybody and then talk a little bit about your organization, and then we can dig into the topic. So without going any further, this is Natalie.
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Natalie Hummel. I'm one of the founders and the executive director of Every Kid Sports. And our mission is just to increase access. So we want to help low-income kids get into sports. When I learned, that 65% of kids today weren't playing, and that the number one reason they weren't playing is they couldn't afford it, just felt like something needed to be done. So that's where we got Every Kid Sports.
This is awesome. And what I love about what you guys are doing is you're really, we're so alike-minded with the National Academy of Athletics and your philosophy in terms of really trying to help kids out. So it's spectacular. I will remind people that if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you do that. Those that have written in questions, please keep them coming because it does stir on some of the conversation as we go forward. So, all right, well, let's dig in. So I want to talk today, and it's interesting how, kind of life kind of forces us and pushes into a direction. So today we're going to talk about the challenges and changes that are facing youth sports organizations. So if you're running a little league or if you're running a recreational league, what's going on and what changes that are happening, and maybe some tips that we can help kind of coming out of 2020. So as we bounce into that a little bit, Natalie, what's been your experience a little bit? What have you kind of seen from Every Kid Sports and your kind of background, and then what you're seeing as we're kind of coming out of little by little into the new norm?
Yeah, unfortunately, the pandemic has taken something that was already kind of in a fragile state and made it even more fragile. So what we've been seeing across the country is the recreational youth sports organizations have really, prior to the pandemic, were hurting, and more families and parents of means were going to these competitive sports models, and a lot of times the recreational sports were being impacted by that. And what the pandemic did is just accelerated that. And we've seen that there's thousands of youth sports organizations around the country that have been forced to close their doors due to the pandemic, and there's being able to come back.
Yeah, it's challenging when we start digging in, and we will in a minute dig a little bit more into the rec versus competitive. But if you think about it, I think you gave me a stat the other day talking about just like youth baseball leagues, like youth little leagues, right? Just the reduction in the numbers of leagues that are available to people, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing it across the board, and that just the amount of leagues that aren't like with Little League, they call it rechartering. But there's, all kinds of little mom and pop youth sports organizations that, were forced to close their doors because of the pandemic. And most of them were never set up to not have a season. So when you think about these youth sports organizations, a lot of them are volunteer based. A lot of them they're not like big profit machines. There's no big backer supporting them. They're
Right.
just out there on a mission to help save the kid, to serve the kids. And when they weren't able to have a season, a lot of them still had rent due. A lot of them had seasons canceled. So they'd already bought uniforms and already paid to have their fields maintained. And then all of a sudden their season was canceled. So they're hit with having to refund the money to the parents because there was no season, but also having all the bills to pay. So a lot of them had to file bankruptcy. And so it's just really, there's a lot of chaos going on in that market right now.
Well, I think back to my journey, and I don't know where I would have been as a kid without youth sports. From the first time my mom brought me to the baseball field and said, here's Coach Islis, you're playing baseball, to playing basketball and football and just all the things we did. And when I was a kid, this may not have been that big of an issue because we used to go down the street and play, right? I mean, we used to, right? I don't know about you, Natalie, and we've talked offline, and we've even talked on Clubhouse. By the way, if you're on Clubhouse, definitely check out Natalie and her information. There's some really good stuff there, which we'll talk about in a minute. But man, right, when we were young, we just played by ourselves. And But what happened is there was this pivot, and I really feel it started happening in the middle 80s, mid 80s, and then kind of carried forward where that recreational sports kind of, because of both parents had to work, right? So now, how do we get kids more engaged in activities that are in a safe environment, right? But if all that has been built up and that's been the norm and what's been relied on, and now it's taken away, I can't imagine the challenges they're going to face, and how that's going to be just damaging for kids, right? They're not going to have opportunities to play.
Yeah, and the thing is that when you look in a low income community, there's already across our country places where they're calling them sports deserts, and where basically what's happened is because the people who can afford it have put their kids in these really competitive programs, and these parents are spending $5,000 to $30,000 a year to have their kids in these elite programs. And what that does is it takes all of the money and all of the things that help support those recreational leagues out of those recreational leagues. So when all you're left with is the low income kids that all need scholarships and financial aid, there's not enough meat on the bones, if you will, to
Right.
sustain some of those organizations. And so those gyms and facilities and courts and fields in those low income communities have fallen under disrepair. And a lot of times there's no place for the kids to go and play that's safe. Even if they did a pickup game, there's no place for them to go and do it. And because all the money has gone into building these private facilities that are out in the suburbs, and they're just far enough away from the inner city kids a lot of times that they can't get to it. Or if you look in a rural setting, those kids are just too far away.
Right.
It's built in a more, suburban where more of the families are. And so it's left those kids on the sidelines. And what happens when they don't have sports to go to is they turn to gangs, they turn to, hanging out on the street corner with their friends, getting into trouble, vandalizing,
Right.
just not the most productive use of their time. And it's really not their fault. There's just not another option for them at the moment.
Well, and if you think about it, I mean, my belief at the National Academy of Athletics and things that I learned from Coach Wooden all the way down, there really is no better life skill teaching tool than youth sports, right? I mean, that's it, because you learn how to deal with success and failure and teamwork and camaraderie and all the different things that we all know that are value benefits. So with that void going on, it's scary. And also, I've even seen it some in Northern California, where it used to be kind of a vibrant, active community of stuff going on, and then schools are building fences around them now, right? And it's
Yeah.
locking down, instead of it being, heck, I played every day after school at the playground on the school, and now you're not allowed to do that. So if they don't have a program that's designed to run on that, and they're not allowing kids to just go down and play as part of the community, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good point, and I'm always shocked when I just see, these locked up playgrounds, where they're just, kids aren't even allowed access to it. And, it's like they end up getting into trouble and doing other things. And, one of the stats I always like to quote is $1 invested in youth sports produces 1,000% return to society. And so,
Wait,
because
wait,
it
wait.
is,
Say that again. I think that's a really good quote.
yeah. So $1 invested in youth sports produces 1,000% return to society. And when you think about it, I mean, so take a kid who
Yeah.
might have the opportunity to sell drugs or to join a gang, or and think of if that child gets into sports and ends up graduating high school and becoming a productive adult versus being incarcerated or committing crimes and vandalism. You can see very quickly how that 1,000% return gets calculated.
Well, and
So
what's interesting is, selfishly, right, we get the return, but think about the impact on the kids' lives, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's you look at both sides and go, oh my gosh, how did we get here? Okay, so let me ask you, let me back up. How did you get involved in your organization? How did you get involved? I mean, what was sports like for you coming up?
Yeah, I was a multi-sport athlete growing up. I played every sport that was possible to be played, both competitively and pickup games in our neighborhood. I mean, we played kick the can every night, and we
Yeah.
played ditch which was basically a giant tag game that we played at night, and
Right.
that we made up in our neighborhood. And we played pick up football games on the blacktop and rode our bikes. And, I grew up in Southern California, and I mean, I grew up surfing and playing beach volleyball, and, you name a sport and I've at least tried it. And it was such a huge part of my, like, how I define myself, and, what I think is, what's made me who I am today. And so I was an executive coach, and I was a consultant, and I kept saying I wanted to make a bigger impact. And it was really out of that desire to make a bigger impact that I had discovered. I met John Valentine, who's one of the other founders, and he had this idea of creating a social enterprise to really impact youth sports. And it was really through the conversation with him that we started Kids in the Game, which now we rebranded during the pandemic and became Everything Sports.
Got it. Love it. Love it. Yeah, you know what? You got a heck of a board. If well, we'll talk more about it later. But yeah, what a great organization. So with so much changes going on, right? And really the last 9 months, or even a full year, if you kind of look at the cycle, and you
Yes.
see, I'm kind of wondering how, if I'm a youth sports organization, kind of like, where do I start? I've got some thoughts on this. I'm sure you do as well. We can kind of share some ideas. But like, if I'm a little league president and I want to run my league again, I got to imagine you got some ideas on, like, where do they even start? Are there resources? Like, where do we guide them? Because I can imagine it's got to be challenging, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's definitely challenging, and I the good news is I think it's a time for reinvention, and there's a time to be creative here. And I think that there's been a lot of models that have been used over the last, 10, 15 years, that we've gotten like on this trajectory of using these models. And I think that the pandemic has disrupted a lot of that. And
yeah,
so I think there's good news in that. So our program, which is called the Pass, allows low-income families to apply for up to $150 to cover registration fees. Right now, that program is available throughout the Pacific Northwest and down in Arizona, but our goal is to have that available nationally.
great.
But for when you talk about Little League, we do have a Little League program right now that is available for low-income families around the country. And so if you're trying to get, a Little League going, and you're wondering how to expand your league or make sure you have enough families, definitely making sure that your family knows, all your families that are low income know that they can apply for our program. And that one is up to $125 to cover the registration fee.
Right.
So
Right.
that would be a place that I would point them. But I just think it's a time for reinvention. People really need to look at what they're doing and making sure that they're putting out things that are, affordable and
I got some specific things that I think, in addition, and I love the idea that you can help out from the tuition side, right? I will say that, look, if you're one of those league coordinators out there, or a league president, and you're trying to run something, I would say this: first of all, don't worry about it, how big it is. You might have 500 kids before. Well, guess what? It may not be that big, right? You might have less facilities. You might have less accessibility. You might have less people in the community. People have less money. You know what? Just do what you can. And so start up again, see where you go. And you might have to go from 40 teams to 20 teams. And that's okay. You're still servicing rather than just throwing everything in. So that's one thing I recommend: is don't worry about being massive. You can find the spot there. Second thing that I recommend for a league and a coordinator, or trying to put things together, is look to the community for resources. Like you're saying, Natalie, think outside the box. You know what I mean? And sometimes you got to do, is there a public-private partnership that might work? Something that can help to make sure, because kids need this. They really do need this. There might be, maybe your charter didn't allow for there to be sponsorship for uniforms or teams before. Maybe it wasn't that way for your volleyball, your soccer, whatever it is. Now, maybe, you know what? You might need to go to the community and go to the grocery store and go to these areas and say, hey, can you sponsor a team, and take that revenue? Because the balance of the financials, you may have to lower that down to make it more affordable. So just some tips that I've got. You got any other ideas you thinking about, maybe league wide, that might help out?
yeah, the other one I would say is there's an organization called Gear Up, and they help take care of the uniform fulfillment for leagues, and they lower that cost for the league. And I would really encourage anybody who's starting a league to look at Gear Up as a way to um, take some cost out of the system and have them. They do a phenomenal job of fulfilling the uniforms, and they do it at a really low cost and high quality, and it's direct to the parent, so that the league doesn't have to order the uniforms in bulk, store them, hand them out, get them to the right kids, and then deal with all the kids that, oh, this doesn't fit or that doesn't fit. So it's direct to the parent. And so that's another resource that I would
And if you used to have these really cool shiny uniforms available to kids and the budget's different, get a t-shirt on them. You know what I mean? Get a different colored t-shirt, throw it on, throw a number on, let's go. The kids, I believe, they don't care about the uniform, right? I mean, yes, they do in one sense, but bottom line, just let them play. And you know what? There's some interesting life lessons that can be taught as we go through this and become a little more humble in terms of our approach. But to me, you know, if you're a league coordinator, we got to do what we can to really help ourselves step back into that lane and offer more going forward. So with recreational sports options being reduced, it's kind of what I'm seeing, right? And I'm seeing more of this focus on the we'll call it elite or travel. Let's call it travel or club, right? And again, if you're a club or travel coach, I'm not speaking negative about you particularly. I guess what I am saying is that there is a difference between I got to pay $1,000 a month to play in this travel team, or I'm going to pay $200 for an entire season, you know? And I understand there's a difference between paid coaches and volunteer coaches for a lot of different factors. But Natalie, what are your thoughts in terms of kind of the direction that we're seeing things go before the pandemic, and now it's exacerbated because of it, correct?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I don't have anything against club uh, teams, travel, elite, all that. Where I have the issue is the impact on the kids. And is it really the best tool to serve the kids, especially at the younger ages? You know, when I see kids 9, 10, 11, 12, and even 13-year-olds playing year round um, soccer, baseball, basketball, whatever, you name the sport. I'm not sure that that's so great for the kids. And I really believe in a multi-sport model where kids go from sport to sport to sport, and they have downtime in between, you know, where there's a couple weeks where they really don't have anything on their schedule. They're allowed to recuperate. You know, the research overwhelmingly shows that it's better for their body, it's better for their emotional well-being, and it creates better athletes. You know, a lot of times when I'm talking to the parents, they put their kids in those competitive programs because they want them to be the best at whatever sport, but they're actually, the research shows that it's actually not the case. They may be better, like compared to their peers at age 10, the kid who's playing a competitive might be a better athlete then. But if you look at those same kids and one kid's playing multi-sport, the other kid is just playing soccer, and you watch him at 16, the kid who was the multi-sport athlete will outperform the kid who only played soccer.
Almost every single time. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. And again, it goes back to the model where we used to play. I've said this a lot. I believe the kid's body is an all-terrain vehicle, and they've got to drive it that way, right? And the other part is that if they get coached by different coaches, they're going to do different life lessons, different disciplines, different things they fall in love with. They're going to have different experiences, and you might be the best baseball player and not so good at basketball, but you get to deal with being a starter versus coming off the bench. It develops empathy. I mean, all those factors that we know that we want kids to learn, right? It kind of spreads them out. You know, it makes me think that what we have to do is educate the parents and help them to understand there is a value proposition to playing on a competitive or travel team, right? And there is an advantage to that. But it's not an advantage for every single kid. I would say be careful of not being able to make your car payment or your house payment because you're going to pay for your kid's sports, right? We don't want to get to that place. And there is something a good friend of mine, Dr. Michael Herbert, talks about. My kid plays down. And it's like, what does that mean? He says, well, I'm not worried about my kid at 9 years old competing with the best and being the best in that. He's just going to play wherever they play, rec ball as much as possible. Why? Because we want them to have as much fun as possible. Because if they're having fun, they're going to continue to want to learn. And most importantly, they're going to continue to want to play. By continuing to play, that's the progression, right?
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And yeah, it's like, you know, girls mature physically earlier than boys. So, you know, at about age 14, 15, they're considered like full grown as far as like the height and things. They still will put on weight and things. And so, having a girl in a competitive program, around age 14 or 15 makes sense. And really earlier than that, having them play one sport year round just is not good for their body and not good for their development. And there's no way that they're going to know at age 9, 10, 11, or 12 what they're ultimately going to be the best at. You won't know that until you've fully grown into your adult form. And with boys, it's, 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of interesting when you might be really fast when you're 9 compared to all of your other teammates, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be fast or quick when you're older, And so,
Right.
I don't know, just exposing them to so many more sports. And I know for me growing up as a multi-sport athlete, I played volleyball and I couldn't wait, I couldn't wait for the season to start. But by the end of the volleyball season, I was
Yeah.
pretty much ready to be done with volleyball.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then I moved on to basketball and I'd get so excited to change my shoes out and, feel the basketball and start shooting hoops. And, it's like I'd had enough volleyball at that point. And,
Right.
and I go through basketball and then all of a sudden it would be so great to be moving, into softball or track or whatever I did in the spring.
Well, especially now because they play so many games. I
Yeah.
mean, it's amazing. It used to be that the teams were built during the season, the players are built in the off season. Now there's no off season because not, and again, like you said, the off season of volleyball could be basketball, could be soccer, could be something else. But the bottom line, if you're playing the same thing, look, I love steak, but if you made me eat steak 365 days a year, I'd become a vegan. I don't want to be a vegan. I like my steak, right? So we got to be
Yeah.
able to mix it up, right? Okay. So we talked a little bit about the specialization. Do you feel that there is a significant, like in your experience, what you're seeing, is there really a significant difference in the experience a child gets in somewhere where there's a paid coach, like in a club, versus maybe a parent volunteer or a volunteer coach? Is there really a big significant difference, or what are you seeing out there?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see that some of those paid coaches have more resources provided to them to provide, like really good coaching in the skills and the fundamentals. I will say that I've seen those paid coaches not be necessarily great um, at development of character and of
Yeah.
teaching life lessons and humility and some of the other things. And I've seen some phenomenal, volunteer coaches that are amazing CEOs of businesses, and they,
Yeah.
know how to run a business, and they're, very good at bringing out the leadership skills in the teams. And so, yeah, I think it's all over the place, and I think that there's opportunities for that that's not. And a lot of times when a parent is paying a coach, they also put these huge expectations on that coach, and the parents all of a sudden feel like they have a much bigger voice in what's going on the field, and because they're paying for it. And so all of a sudden you get these super aggressive parents that are yelling on the sidelines and coaching their kids and yelling at the coach because their kid's not getting enough playing time. And I'm paying $5,000 for this, and my kid should be playing.
Right.
And blah, blah, blah. So
It's interesting. I've got a coach that actually we met on Clubhouse, and in fact we're going to be speaking about that later today. And he's up in Canada, and he's got a fairly elite training program for tennis, right? And some of what he does is he mixes in a little bit of soccer, a little bit of ultimate frisbee, and a little bit of basketball into what he does. And some of the newer parents come in because they're paying a lot of money for this program. They're like, okay, dude, you're nuts. This isn't working. And he has to kind of explain to them that this is how they develop their body. This is how they develop hand-eye coordination. This is how they develop and don't lose the love of, and just these little things that can be tips that can help a child to have more fun. It's not necessarily what they're going to do at the elite level. They're going to mix it up. But if you're a basketball fan, you watch Steph Curry, he's dribbling a basketball and a tennis ball, doing multiple things. And I think that again goes back to why it's so important to play multiple sports and have multiple seasons. So, okay, I tend to agree in terms of, you get what you pay for in some senses. However, in the recreational space, to me, I think it's more important that you get as much different opportunity for kids to try lots of different things and then figure out what they're gravitated towards going forward. And there are some amazing coaches out there that do this full time. And like you said, the one thing that I get nervous about and I get concerned with is if the club philosophy is not really clear and the parents don't get an idea of exactly what that is, it can cause a challenge, because if a club's philosophy is we're going to win championships, right? That can be a challenge with kids, especially if the parents aren't kind of ready for that and they're not sure what's going on, even if their kid is a hell of a player, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
for
that
sure.
that can really cause a problem for them. So then I would say if I'm a parent and I'm looking at leagues now, there are going to be some leagues that whether it's Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, whatever the organization is, that you got to kind of find out. And I would definitely still investigate who's going to be coaching my child. You got to know that, right? Are they background checked, all those factors? But that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go for the elite. I think you got to find the balance and figure that out. What I found with my kids is that in some teams they like playing the recreational, and other sports they really wanted the competitive, and that was great. We kind of let them play both ends of it. I mean, my daughter played soccer, basketball, and she does cheerleading, right? So mix it up a little bit. My son was baseball, basketball, football, and just mix it up and let them have those experiences. I think is important. So now we're at a place where, okay, leagues are starting to come back and they're starting to figure this out, right? And they have all these new hoops they've got to jump through and protocols, right? So how do you think, if you're speaking to a league president, how do you recommend that they kind of come back? What are some of the things they need to do to kind of be able to be ready and engage and kind of move forward and bringing the leagues back to whatever level they get to go back and play? Got any tips on that?
Boy, I just think that they've got to do their research. It's so different in every community. There's so
Right.
many different rules and regulations, but I do think that there's a lot of research that shows that at least outdoor sports are pretty safe for kids. There's not, high rates of transmission and things, and just, yeah, being super prepared for all the little things and just doing your research of what needs to be done. But I really encourage them to try and get back to where they're, like you said, it doesn't have to be what it was before, right? Just giving the kids the opportunity to play. And one of the things that's going on in our town is they're not allowing, big travel. You have to stay within kind of the city
Right.
boundaries, and so we live in Central Oregon, and so that kind of includes, Madras, Sisters, Redmond, and Pineville, and so there's like a few communities here. They can all stay here, but once you cross over the Cascades, that's considered, traveling outside of your region, and that's not allowed right now. And gosh, there's plenty of competition right here in this little
Right.
community. And so I think each league needs to just understand what can we actually make happen right here. And I think they'd find that there is plenty of competition and plenty of good thing in their local community,
Right.
and
Well,
just like you
I,
said, kind of just rethinking it.
yeah, I get it. And again, it's going to take somebody to kind of step back for a second. I'm reminding what Coach Wooden taught me, which is don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. Right. So
Yeah.
think about, okay, what can we do? What can we provide? Whether it's a shortened season, whether it's less games, whether it's less practices, whatever it is, whether it's a different uniform thing or whatever it is that we need to do, that's what we can figure out there. So
Yeah.
good. Okay. All right. So, kind of as we wrap up and kind of pull this together, I want to be able to kind of say what's the next piece for if they have someone that wants to play, and I'm a parent and I'm kind of struggling in terms of financials or whatnot. Like, how do they reach out to you, or how do they connect? And if I'm in Oregon or Washington, it sounds like it's a no-brainer. What are my options? What can you help them out with?
Yeah, so our program is available in Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and Arizona.
Wait,
And
wait, say those again. I want to make sure people get this.
yeah,
So, yeah.
so it's in Montana,
Okay.
Wyoming, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and Arizona. And that's for all sports.
Great.
And then the Little League program is called the T-Mobile Little League Call-Up Grant. Again, that's nationwide. So anyone across the country that wants to register for Little League that's low income can go there.
And
And
you
so
said it's a T-Mobile call-up grant?
Little League Call-Up Grant, and those are both on our website. So we're
Okay,
everykidsports.org. And if you
great.
go under programs, you'll see both of those programs available there.
Fantastic.
And my goal is to have our pass program for all sports available across the country. So we're actively working on it right now. And, as soon as we have that available, we'll be announcing that publicly. And
Great. Good. Love it. Love it. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time today. If you enjoy listening to what's going on Talk, Teach, Play, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you want to get in touch with myself, you can reach out through the National Academy of Athletics.com. Obviously, we're on, all the social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. Anyways, just find us out there for sure. And I would also say that if you have questions or ideas or thoughts or need some help, I've got great resources like Natalie or other people that I can connect with. Sometimes we get some great emails that actually stir on additional conversations. So please, we're working hard to improve the lives of kids through youth sports. And we need your feedback and your questions and input. So I appreciate, Natalie, I appreciate your time today. And I will say, as always, to everybody here at the Talk, Teach, Play, thanks for jumping on with us. Thanks for those that have already subscribed and supporting us. And I always like to remind people, whether you're at work, whether you're a kid is at the park, whatever it is, to always, always, always play hard and have fun. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
yeah, thank you so much. Great to be on.
Thanks.